What he sees is a young shepherd writhing, gagging in spasms, his face distorted, and a heavy black snake hung out of his mouth. Had I ever seen so much nausea and pale dread on one face? He seemed to have been asleep when the snake crawled into his throat, and there bit itself fast. My hand tore at the snake and tore in vain. It did not tear the snake out of his throat. Then it cried out of me, "Bite! Bite its head off, bite!" Thus it cried out of me my dread, my hatred, my nausea, my pity. All that is good and wicked in me cried out with a single cry. You bold ones who surround me, you searchers and researchers, he means you and me now. Guess me this riddle that I saw then, interpret me the vision of the loneliest, for it was a vision and a foreseeing.
Well, keep the shepherd.
The shepherd, however, bit as my cry counseled him. He bit with a good bite. Far away he spewed the head of the snake, and he jumped up. No longer shepherd, no longer human, one changed, radiant, laughing. Never yet on earth has a human being laughed as he laughed. Okay, 2 points I would make.
My favorite passage, one of my favorite passages in the book.
So in German, the phrase for the eternal recurrence of the same is actually the eternal recurrence of the gleich, which means like. It's the eternal return of the like. So when he asks himself, had I ever heard a dog howl like this? Or have I ever seen a shepherd doing like this? And he says, verily, what I saw, I had never seen the like. What does that mean in the context of the eternal return of the like? If it is a true eternal return, he must have seen this eternally, the likeness of it eternally. And then at the end, when he says, no longer shepherd, no longer human, one changed, radiant, laughing, never yet on earth has a human being laughed as he laughed. That means there is no eternal return, that there is a newness there which is beyond this nausea.
Yeah, and I would say, well, the version I'm arguing for, I think we're both arguing against, in a sense, a very simple reading of it as either literal recurrence or also as a psychological injunction, It functions in multiple ways. There's no doubt about it. Nietzsche has different formulations of it that he provides in various works of his where it means, well, look at your life. Do you want to do this same thing a million times? If not, why are you doing it now? That's okay. That's existential, but it's a little banal to me. I'm sure someone could articulate it more effectively, but I just find that boring. What I find much richer, though, is seeing it as a way of understanding particular beings as no longer being, but as becoming. It's a way of articulating a thinking of becoming, where things aren't even static. They're not static and fixed, but they're always slipping past themselves, behind themselves. They're interacting with other things, with us. They have resonances. They can evoke other moments, other events. This is how I understand the dancing of things. So he can hear this dog howl, and it can remind him of another dog howl. And I want to understand that as a consequence of the blurred boundaries of one particular event, that it's able to then, because of that entrance into becoming, resonate with other events. And I'd like to say that were we to think it as a discrete, enclosed being, we couldn't compare it in the same way. We could only, map it and find it to be identical or not, and that would somehow would miss the evocative character of it, precisely how it exceeds itself.
What do you make of the snake? What is this snake that has crawled into the man's mouth? Because a snake is, on the one hand, the snake figures many times in Zarathustra. It's also what the eagle has the snake, and the snake is a figure of the eternal return because it's the...
wrapped around his neck while the eagle goes in cycles.
Right, and it's circular. It bites its own tail, and it's the figure of this perfect circle. So, why is it a snake? And what is the liberation that takes place when the head of the snake is bitten off?
Yeah, it's a shepherd choking on a giant snake. This is the thought of eternal recurrence that Nietzsche wants to think. The snake has bitten him, and he can't get the snake to bite its own tail. I mean, I think that's how this imagery is functioning in the text. It's also the poison, the bile that's eating us up inside that we need to spew out. We're choking on it. We're suffocating in our resentment and bile. And the shepherd has a higher task than that. The shepherd bites the head off, spews it out, and is transformed. With this new body, I would say, the transfiguration is the entrance into this new body. And then there's this laughter that he's never heard. And I think laughter is a key component in Nietzsche, in Zarathustra as well. And it's not as unambiguous as it's often considered. Laughter's not simply... all laughter's not the same in Nietzsche, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. There's a sardonic, malicious laughter that, we read and we can join in on sometimes. And then there's this childish, free, innocent laughter. And I think the point that someone like Derrida makes in reading Joyce and talking about laughter is that the laughter is almost it's ambiguous. You can't discern at times which laughter it is. Is it the laughter, a freeing laughter of pure expression of joy in life, or is it the sardonic, malicious laughter? When you read Zarathustra, so many times the laughter is characterized as malicious. I laughed a malicious laugh, and you think, what? Why is he laughing maliciously? Or throughout the book, there's these strange couplings of emotions, laughter and hatred, malice, that don't quite go together so easily. It's easy to breeze over it in reading, but if you give pause to think, the laughter isn't always the same.
Yeah.
But that doesn't go back to the singularity point of not having seen a sight like this before.
Yeah, well, at the very least, there's something deeply paradoxical about invoking the singularity of an event in the context of the doctrine of the eternal return of the same. And if the overman is the meaning of the earth, or if it's the will who says the overman shall be the meaning of the earth, and if the overman is somehow the person who can say yes to the concept of the eternal return, then we better understand what this yes is saying yes to. Mm-hmm. And I think one way of how about a crazy interpretation that I propose to you of the eternal return? That basically, if the eternal return is the idea that is going to liberate the will from its fetters, and if the will is suffering from the fact that it basically cannot will backwards, then it has to find a way to will backwards, but not in this mechanical willing the past forwards. I agree with you. How about the will finding a way to will the origins of things eternally or into the future? And by the origins of things, I mean in an Anaximander sense of that from which things emerge into the world, namely some kind of matrix of things, and especially of species, and that therefore the overman would be saying yes to the origins of that which have of species of the earth in their origination, you know? And that therefore there would be some kind of affirmation of, again, I go back to the animal, and not just merely the human, because it would seem that rather than transcending on a kind of evolutionary concept of going from our origins in the beast, because he says the overman is somewhere between, or the man is at a bridge somewhere between the beast and the overman, no? But to will the eternal return is to, in a certain sense, will the beast into the future, but not the beast understood in the degraded mode of just the animal deprived of its own spirit.
Brute animality.
But a new kind of animality that would not be the privileged domain of the human. So it would not just be the human that has the new body and the new limbs, but that through that new body, we would understand even the animals and even the plant life in a completely new meaning of the earth way that would redeem the earth from its degradation in this other way of thinking.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think my version of the eternal recurrence, which I'll admit is maybe a little violent, not too violent though, shows things as dancing. And by dancing, again, I mean they're expanded beyond their boundaries. They're entering into this matrix that you're talking about. I see the eternal recurrence as a way of thinking becoming. Becoming as not simply thought transitionally in time, but also transitionally in space, that something is not discretely present, but seeping past itself into this engagement with matrix, with others that you're talking about. And that makes each of these things a relational entity. It's in a particular place, in a particular context. And insofar as it occupies that particular place, that particular context, at that particular time, and is a contributing member to that context by being outside of itself, it is singular. It's unique. Each of these things, only by being